Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, continuing with That One Play series this offseason, which we had a lot of fun with. Going to talk about a play that is not well liked in Ravens history, certainly. Not one that evokes fond memories, but an important one nonetheless. And that's the 2008 Santonio Holmes reversed on appeal touchdown that gave the Steelers the division-clinching win effectively against the Ravens that season. Here to talk about with me is Slava Cooperstein. Slava, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ken. Subject matter aside.
Yeah, there you go. So tell us a little bit why you picked this play in particular.
Apparently I'm just stuck in 2008 because every time I do one of these with you, it's about something in the 2008 season. But it was just a really memorable one. Had a lot of ups and downs. And this was sort of just a punctuation, a negative punctuation on the regular season. When I was thinking about this play, I was thinking about where Santonio Holmes sort of fits in the mini pantheon of reviled Steelers receivers, which I think is sort of accentuated by the fact that Ravens have had their own receiver issues. So it's a little frustrating to see your most bitter rival have such success. Santonio is a little bit of a forgotten man. He became the primary receiving threat for the receivers in the years before Antonio Brown came on. But of course, it was Hines Ward was the big, threat, and AB was the big threat after, and they were both great villains for different reasons and really effective receivers. But I did a little research about how effective Santonio Holmes was about the Ravens or against the Ravens. So from December of 2004 to December of 2010, Hines Ward scored 0 touchdowns against the Ravens. And then did score a touchdown in the 2010 playoffs. So that's quite a drought. In 17 career games versus the Ravens, Antonio Brown scored 5 times. And in just 8 career games versus the Ravens as a Steeler, Santonio Holmes scored a total of 7 times, plus 1 in the 2008 playoffs. So he very regularly scored against us.
That obviously is a pretty significant record there. And so Holmes ends up being one of the architects of villainy in this one. But Ravens came into this game, had an early graduation into what do I call it? Contention again after a terrible 2007 season, dominated by injuries in the secondary. Finally getting rid of Kyle Bowler after the 2007 season, and bringing in Joe Flacco and Ray Rice at the top of the draft. The Ravens got off to a great year. They had put together an outstanding offensive line. Marshall Yanda, amazing. He was kept on the bench for much of 2008, but it was a great offensive line. The 08 and 09 lines are really the greatest in Ravens history. And they were winning. But take us through some of the early season that got us to this game in December that was pretty much for all the marbles at the time.
So this game was happening. This was week 15, and leading up to that, the Ravens were 9-4 with a 4-1 record in the division. They had dominated the AFC North with a 4-1 record, and of course with their sole loss in the AFC North at that point against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the teams that they lost to were pretty good teams. They'd lost to the Steelers, who eventually went on to win the Super Bowl. They lost to the Titans, which a loss that they would avenge in the playoffs. But the Titans were considered by many to be the class of the NFL that season. And in fact, the Titans, I believe, beat the Steelers that season as well.
The following week.
And we lost to the Colts. That was pretty a real beatdown, 31-3 against Peyton Manning's Colts. And the Colts, were regularly whooping us at that time, sorry to say. And then kind of a sloppy loss against the Giants. But for the most part, those were losses to quality teams, and the Ravens were rolling along at a good clip.
Yeah, the Giants just won the Super Bowl too. It wasn't like they were a pushover. The game was at the Meadowlands. Tough game for the Ravens, obviously, to not get that one. Now, it is important to note that the Ravens, with all their success, if they'd won the game against the Steelers, both teams would have ended up 5-1 in the division. And the Steelers still had an advantage in, I believe it's the AFC games, but there may have been a common opponent tiebreaker even before that. But they did have an advantage in AFC games. It was going to give them the tiebreaker. So the Ravens not only needed to win this game, but also win out and hope for the Steelers to lose to the Titans, which they did the very next week. So this game, anyway, came into it. The very tightly played, close to the vest game, fairly cold weather. Temperature I remember being in the 40s at the time. Flacco had one of his worst games as a pro with a 22 rating. Threw 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. Ravens didn't really do a lot on the ground, but they did manage 112 yards. What else can you tell us about the game up to this point?
I mean, it was your classic Ravens Steelers slugfest. A lot of defensive highlights. Samari Rolle forcing Santonio Holmes incidentally fumble, which was recovered by Ed Reed. This was one of your classic Roethlisberger Suggs matchups, where it just seemed every single time that I'm sure for Ravens fans it feels like every single time Suggs is in pursuit of Roethlisberger right as he manages to throw a great pass, but I'm sure Steelers fans will tell you that it just felt like, Suggs was always draped over Roethlisberger. But it was, one of the great matchups between the two of them. I think Suggs did force a fumble, a Roethlisberger fumble, which was recovered in midair by Brian McKinney. It was just it was a field goal fest, right? You got 3 field goals by Matt Stover. 2 by Jeff Reed, if anybody remembers that upstanding
he's
citizen.
A crazy man.
Yeah, he definitely made headlines a lot for things outside of his kicking. And then that led to pretty much towards the end of the fourth quarter. I actually forgot to put the timestamp, but it's very close to the end of the fourth quarter, so under a minute to go. Mm-hmm. It's 3rd and goal on the Ravens 4-yard line. Steelers are marching, and 3rd and goal. They have Hines Ward and Santonio Holmes as the receivers, and Heath Miller as the tight end. And Roethlisberger kept a running back as sort of a check down option. And this is sort of classic Roethlisberger play. He takes the snap, scrambles left. The defense pursues. There's nothing there. Scrambles right. Suggs is just within inches, right? And Roethlisberger, as he is wont to do, buys just enough time to throw the ball to Santonio Holmes, who laterally is in the middle of the end zone, and his feet are 100% in the end zone. But it appears that the ball and that the ball doesn't break the plane. He catches it outside of the end zone. And so the refs rule it down at that time at the 1-yard line or at the, whatever half-yard line. Which
would have brought up 4th down and goal from that spot. There were 50 seconds to go when the pass was thrown. So they would have set up a for all the marbles play on the very next play had that happened.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Left that way, yeah.
Or the Steelers, I guess, could have played for the
they could have played to tie the game.
Yeah. Played to tie the game. That's right. Hard to say what they would have done. I mean, it's a really, it was tough sledding for both teams that day offensively. You might go ahead and take your chances there. But either way, it was a hugely consequential play. It seemed that the review took forever, and every single angle of the review seemed to suggest that the ball did not cross the plane. There was a really good, from the offense's left sideline camera on the goal line, that where Ed Reed comes from behind Santonio Holmes and hits him, right as he's getting to the ball, and seems to show that the ball doesn't cross the plane. I mean, that seemed to be the alpha and the omega of the play. But referee Walt Coleman nonetheless came back and said, after reviewing the play, the receiver had 2 feet down in the end zone with possession of the ball. We have a touchdown in front of a then record Baltimore Ravens home crowd, which was received about as well as you would think.
Yeah, and needless to say, that set of conditions, as stated, does not create a touchdown necessarily.
Right, exactly. He neglected, Coleman completely neglected to say whether the ball crossed the plane, which really was the only thing that was in dispute, right? Nobody had any doubt that Santonio Holmes' feet were in the end zone. Nobody had any doubt that he caught the ball cleanly or that he maintained possession through the catch and went down. So I did a little bit of research on Walt Coleman and learned, interestingly, that he was the official who made the call in the tuck rule game, the infamous tuck rule game between the Patriots and the Oakland Raiders that sent the Patriots on their way to the Super Bowl. After the game, he was interviewed and said, yeah, the ball was breaking the plane. He had 2 feet down and completed the catch with control of the ball breaking the plane of the goal line. A little bit flippant and a little bit late, in my opinion.
That's an important distinction there too. You could be juggling the football and the ball could cross the plane. And we've seen that happen at other key moments. The 4th and 2 play where Belichick went for it, I believe had a juggling component to it where control of football wasn't established until after he was driven back behind the line to gain.
And that was against the Colts?
Yeah, against the Colts in, I don't remember the exact year. It was around this time.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that play, and you're exactly right. I mean, it was otherwise a very clean catch. The only thing that was in controversy was the thing that the referee didn't comment on, which was frustrating. And this was actually, in some ways, a really annoying time to be a Ravens fan in some aspects, like around these early Harbaugh years. You had every time you were watching a Ravens game, if Collinsworth was on the broadcast, he was just fawning over Ben Roethlisberger. Brady got, crazy calls, like when Suggs, barely brushed by his leg. And Peyton Manning was just, whooping us every time. And it really reinforced this notion that the Ravens were, just beneath the class of the AFC, which were those 3 teams that, we had some trouble surmounting. So this was really a punctuation to all of that in that time.
Yeah, definitely a moment that it's just one of those things that you wonder. We've seen so many calls not get reversed and been frustrated by it. Time after time after time, and you just wonder, where is the incontrovertible evidence that made this call reversible when all those others were not. And a lot of other people said after the fact, and broadcasters, the important thing is they got the call right. Well, no, that's not the important thing. The important thing is that they follow the rules correctly of challenges, and that they require incontrovertible evidence to overturn that call. That's not exactly the correct word, by the way, incontrovertible, but whatever the correct terminology is, it was not achieved on this call. And Coleman's description of it made it that much worse a situation. The time I can think of a play that went in the Ravens' favor, where I really did not like the referee's method of describing it, was the 2001 Monday Night Football play at Tennessee. So the Ravens ended up stopping the Titans on 4th and 1 on an untimed down to win that game at the end of regulation. So on the play before, Peter Boulware had crossed the line to go back onside. The Ravens thought the game was over. Boulware did at least. He was late getting back. He touched the offensive lineman. That's an encroachment call right then. Stop the clock. Now, the Ravens had other things. It's like, they weren't even lined up properly. They didn't have the right number of men on the line of scrimmage. So it might have been offsetting penalties at that point, which honestly wouldn't have made that much a difference because it was only about a half-yard penalty given what happened. They had about a 5-minute review of that play, and they came back and the official said, on a play of this magnitude, and it was like the worst possible way you could start this, has nothing to do with the magnitude of the play. Has nothing to do with it. Okay, just leave that out of there. The defender touched the offensive lineman and encroached after discussion. That'll be enforced from the 1 yard line. We'll have an untimed down, blah, blah, blah. That's all you needed to say. And, but to start it off with on a play of this magnitude is the same mistake that Coleman made to talk about other factors that aren't part of the decision as he went through with the description of the play itself. So very, very frustrating.
Yeah, it's like you and I said, I think a few days before about this play. Had the call gone the other way, it probably wasn't going to have indisputable visual evidence, whatever the whatever the terminology is, to make the call go our way, because it was just so close. It's one of those rare calls. The call ought to stand, and it didn't, and the Steelers benefited, and that basically sealed the AFC North for them that season.
Yes, and the Ravens still would have needed a little help. They needed Tennessee to beat the Steelers. They did, and then that made it feel that much of a knife twist the next week. The Ravens went in, took care of business against the Cowboys. We're still playing for their playoff lives in the final game of the season. Had they lost that game to Jacksonville, they wouldn't have made it. And they beat them pretty handily, 27-7, with Ed Reed having a couple more picks in that game. But just one of those sequences against the Steelers that, boy, the Ravens didn't have any offense in the game. It was a pretty typical game in a lot of ways. The Ravens in the playoffs, I thought the game was extremely similar. The AFC Championship loss to them, in terms of it being a game where the Ravens couldn't really generate much offensively, and they still managed to hang in the game with some key turnovers and stayed in it. We've seen that from the Ravens a number of times in the playoffs, twice against Tennessee, most notably. But anyway, they had their chance there as well, and unfortunately, it didn't work out. Rookie year for Flacco. He looked great in the Week 3 loss at Pittsburgh when they lost 23-20. He really had a terrific game, including, I don't know if folks even remember this play, but he had a 12.6 second pocket time on one pass in that Week 3 game.
Wow,
Happen to remember that one?
No, I
running around left, all the way to the left sideline, back to the right sideline, kind of thing. It's just a remarkable play, worth taking a look at. I wish somebody had taken that on that one play.
That's incredible. That's like McNabb against the Cowboys that one time, right? Where he just keeps running back and forth. Wow, 12 seconds. That's a long
impressive time. You go back to football in the 1970s. Fran Tarkenton had a few plays like that where he would just run around, the pocket would get reestablished, and the Vikings were pretty good at that time, and the Ravens obviously as well, in terms of reestablishing a pocket and maintaining blocks for that long, because it's easy to get, just decide I'm not going to hold after a certain amount of time, but you got to really then reset and look, where's my quarterback going? How do I remake that? It doesn't work otherwise if you've got 4 defenders chasing Flacco down there.
Well, lest we forget, Flacco is a little bit more mobile than we give him credit for, given that his first touchdown was a 38-yard touchdown run. So
to start this season, that was a big one. All right, well, great choice of play, Slav. I'm glad we had a chance to review that. And in terms of Ravens history in the 2008 tournament, it could have been the Ravens playing at home in the AFC Championship had that call been made properly. And it obviously, the Ravens have never had one at home, and that would have made just a difference, I think, in terms of being able to play it. The Steelers remained a big hump for this team really through about 2010. In fact, you could say through 2014, which is really when they beat them in the playoffs for the first time, beating to end a long streak of playoff losses to all Pittsburgh teams.
Well, luckily we got the monkey off our back, and onward and upward.
All right, Slava, really appreciate you coming on for this. Tell folks where they can talk football with you.
I'm on Twitter at Slava Cooperstein. That's SLAVAKUPERSTEIN. All
right. Thanks very much for coming on. Other folks out there who want to do a film study short, I'm open season, open mic this time of year. I'd love to hear from you. DM me on Twitter. I'll always respond to those fairly quickly, and they're always open. If you have analytics topic, that one play you want to do, other things about being an armchair GM, whatever it might be, franchise building, eager to talk to you about it and hear your thoughts. Slava, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.